Now, let's all be honest for a moment. These days, there are just too many games being released, which, depending on how you look at it, can be a good or a bad thing, or even both. It's good that we have an incredible amount of choice in the gaming market, but I also feel it's kinda bad, because I can't help myself but feel that I'm drowning in the amount of games that are out there, and there's no way I will be able to play all these games in my lifetime. So logically, many games land on the back burner for me. I see them, I think they're cool or interesting looking, and that I definitely want to see more of them at some point, but right now I want to focus on a different game, or I don't have the budget to buy them, and then I just leave them for a year or so, to come back to later. To see what have become of them, so to say. Sandland is one of those games that are treated like this, a game based on the same named manga series created by the legend himself, Akira Toriyama. May you rest in peace. You know the drill, Sandland intrigued me. The art style, of course, is obviously one of the things that intrigued me, as Toriyama's art style is a character by itself, but it also showed vehicle combat in the desert, which reminded me of the Mad Max game that I played on the PlayStation 4. Does anyone remember that game these days? No? It's just me? Well, alright. That game also offered vehicle combat in the desert, which for the time was pretty fine in my opinion, even a lot of fun. So yeah, I was intrigued by the idea that Sandland offered something similar, but with a lot more anime. I was a little bit worried going into the game, as despite the fact that it involved Akira Toriyama and Bandai Namco, on Steam it seemed like the game was barely getting off the ground in the past year and a half. But maybe I worry too much and it's just fine and an overlooked game, that's always possible. Or maybe I should have worried a lot more and all these reviews are misleading. Less likely, in my opinion. But there's only one way to find out. This is my review of Sandland. After many years of natural disasters and wars, the world has become a desert, hence the name Sandland. Life in this desert is for most a struggle, as valuable resources like food or water are scarce, and those who control these finite resources abuse it for power. But there are not just humans living in this terrible world. A small group of demons live in this desert as well, and they, for the most part, have a fun good old time. In this story, we follow the fierce demon prince Beelzebub, who likes nothing more than to scare humans, steal their loot, and play video games. On one day, however, a sheriff named Ryo comes to the demon town and asks the demon prince for help to find a mythical spring so that the people of Sandland can live a better life, and with time, the land can be restored. Now, of course, the son of the devil himself is actually very interested in helping Ryo, because as a reward, he gets new video games. So off they go, finding the mythical spring. Sandland at first glance seems to have a very serious story premise of hope for the people in a dire, dangerous world, bringing an end to their suffering and constant struggle of survival. But as we view this story from Beelzebub's point of view, there is a constant childish but humorous twist added to it. Ironically, it are his partners on this adventure that somewhat play the angel on Beelzebub's shoulder, steering him in directions on doing what is right for the people or the world. Which creates some fun interactions amongst the cast of characters in an already humoristic world, as the world itself also doesn't take itself seriously at times. I particularly love how Beelzebub and the other demons just love the fact that people are afraid by them by default, and that the running joke is that they constantly judge the way people react on seeing them. However, where the humor and character interaction is strong, the main story itself faltered at times, even struggled with the pacing. Overall, it felt very hastily in telling its plot, even going at such a speed that at some point I thought the story was going to end, only to find out it was the middle point and that a lot of things were still going to happen. Which made me run out of steam when it comes to the main story and strengthened the hasty feeling. What is worse is that we make hastily our way through the first part of the story for something that felt not really worth it in terms of plot in the second part of the game. Because that part was just much less interesting than how the initial story started off and how it shaped itself as we progressed. And I don't understand why they decided to do this, as the game was big enough and had a strong base of characters to develop the story a lot slower, and therefore, in my opinion, a lot better. This, however, explains why I enjoyed the side quests a lot more in this game. In Sandland, you get tasked to help out a village by doing small quests for them. Of course, you do these out of the kind, greedy heart of Beelzebub to gain access to certain resources and services he needs to travel across Sandland. However, as you help the village, it will develop, grow, and eventually come to life in this dead world, which is one of my favorite ways to show progression. Now, there is not a lot of choice in how your village will develop, but it was a more fun and interesting story to follow halfway through the game than the main story. The rewarding feeling must also not be underestimated whenever you helped out people across Sandland, because each villager had its own little fun story and added new possibilities for you to explore, especially in terms of upgrades and customization of your vehicles, because that is the driving force of this game. I mentioned in the opening of this review that at first glance Sandland's vehicle combat gave me the vibes of Mad Max combat, and in reality it's sometimes similar and even feels similar, but at its core it's very different. Where in Mad Max, timing and aim during combat was important, in Sandland, unfortunately, other aspects play a key role. As the world is a big desert for most of the playthrough, you have to rely on vehicles to get from A to B. However, there are many dangers on your route, like wildlife, bandits, or the Royal Army. No matter what you find in the wild, it will try to take you out. Thankfully, the vehicles, or bots as they are called in-game, are designed to face all these threats and to navigate through the desert. The main bot, and even its mascot so to say of the game, is the tank, but you can also get a variety of bikes, walkers, and even a hovercraft. Each comes with its own types of weapons that could complement a player's own playstyle. Keyword here being could, as unfortunately Sandland has a number-based combat system. Now, to some, this doesn't sound unfortunate at all, but personally I find that these kind of combat systems are way overused and in games like this form a lot of problems. Like how it stops a player from using all vehicles and making them all feel the same, even though they all have unique weapons. Take for example the car with a lock-on missile launcher on the back. A very cool idea, and was even cooler to unlock it because you have to work towards it, find the parts and eventually assemble it. After you've done all that, it's exciting to jump in and find some enemies to use it, only to find out that its number game is very weak. And therefore this entire bot is kinda useless. I mean, its lock-on works fine, but it takes too long to deal damage, and the damage that is dealt is a lot lower than, for example, your default bot, the tank. So why should you not use the tank in every combat scenario? Its damage is higher and more effective and makes combat not too long. Of course you can upgrade each vehicle's levels and find parts to improve them even more, but that brings me to my biggest dislike of these kind of games. Being forced to change build and therefore weaken my experience because I have a new weapon or part that is better, not in terms of gameplay, but purely in terms of stats. After a while, I found a cannon part for my tank which dealt okay damage, not very good, but had a large explosion area, making it easy to deal with foot soldiers and larger groups of enemies. It also didn't have a very bad drop-off, making longer shots worth my while. I used it for a time and tried to keep using it for as long as possible, but once I found a new cannon part that had higher stats, I was just forced to use that as I reached a stage that the enemies' numbers were too high to keep using a weaker gun. What is worse is that this new gun was the default one, but with just higher stats, meaning that I not only was forced to change build, but that the game purposely pushed me out of a different playstyle to the default one. And that's just something I really dislike, not just here, just in any game for that matter. On top of that, here in Sandland it breaks immersion, where a guy can just shake off being directly hit by a tank shell. Thankfully, this game design didn't waste the bots entirely, as there is a lot of use for them outside of the combat. This mostly boils down to traversing the land or overcoming physical obstacles you must get over. It's simple, but nonetheless it's better than unlocking them and never using them. Now, maybe you've played the game before or saw other reviews before this one and think, what are you on about? This game is not difficult, so you can play whatever you like and want, no matter what the numbers say. Which is actually a fair argument to make here, as the game is relatively easy, even on the highest difficulty. Almost akin to a Lego game or something along those lines, as losing isn't punishing and such. And if it wasn't for the fact that combat gets so annoyingly long and sluggish if you use weaker bots, I would agree with this attitude, as it doesn't matter at that point. But again, the numbers weigh too much in the combat that therefore we, the player, are bound to play by its rules and can't bend around it. Outside of the vehicle combat and story, Sandland also just lacks a certain degree of polish and even a completed vision for what the game wants to be. It has multiple side aspects that on paper sound very interesting, but in reality feels almost out of place or unfinished. Like Sandland has a full-fledged stealth system, which was very surprising. However, it was not great to play with. It felt very clunky and again a lack of polish. It also is the worst type of stealth system in my opinion, where if you get spotted, you get sent back instantly to the beginning or a checkpoint. But if that wasn't bad enough, detection is very inconsistent, where you get spotted behind cover, cause I guess the guards have a sixth sense or something? Beside that, being placed back to the beginning when spotted is so unnecessary, as this game does have a combat system outside of vehicles as well. As you would expect right now, this was also a very clunky system that was close in being alright, but in the end felt like it was an afterthought during development. It's supposed to be like beat 'em up style action combat where you have to beat up your enemies and use some skills here and there. This combat system is just like stealth, sporadically thrown in your playthrough, almost catching you off guard whenever it happens. And it's just not there in terms of polish or design. These moments actually benefit from the lack of difficulty, because it's a moment of annoyances or less fun that you want to be done with ASAP so that you can get back to the real fun. That being of course the vehicle combat, but even the story and such as well. Which is a very surprising thing to say considering the problems the story had, moments in the combat and certain design choices that were made. If anything, it's very flawed, but it managed to balance that out just enough with fun moments with characters, periods of good vehicle combat, and a progression curve that felt very natural and rewarding. Again, it's very similar to how I feel about LEGO game. Though now that I've played Sandland, I do get why this game is somewhat struggling, and I wish I could recommend it to a lot of people, but I found myself equally struggling to recommend it. Right off the bat, full price, this game is just not worth it. So if you have interest in the game, be sure it's on sale at least half its price tag, if not more. And what is even more important is that when you decide to dive into Sandland, be sure your expectations are rightfully tuned to things I mentioned in my review. The comparison has come up a couple of times, but I would say treat Sandland as a LEGO game. If you can do that and wait for the right price, you will have a fun time with it.